Hello, everybody. So, before we get into the first opening, there will be There will be partial spoilers for every part of the series. So if you're not caught up, go get caught up because some of the future characters and fights will definitely be spoiled in this opening. With that being said, however, do all that fancy YouTube stuff if you could. The like, the comment, the subscribe, because that throws the channel further into the YouTube algorithm, helps get the content in more places, and hopefully one day will allow me to make better content. Anyways, enough rambling aside. This opening first played in the second episode, and its final episode that played in was episode 9. One thing to note was that in episode 9, there was an alternate version of this known as the sound effects opening, which somewhat became a tradition in which this opening, it is almost completely silent besides the actual music, which you can find a full version and a TV length version of on YouTube. And then the sound effects version would be the opening visuals, the music, and then some light sound effects. Some of them are like the actual sound effects that play during certain scenes. Others are like sound effects of some of them are just like sound effects of like things like weapons or things being, used, I guess. It's hard to explain without you watching the non-sound effects and the sound effects version back to back. Anyways, we can hit play. Okay, right there. She is the final JoJo, the original universe, Jolene Cujo, making her first appearance in episode 1 of Stone Ocean and chapter 1 of Stone Ocean. She is the son of Jotaro Kujo, who we will be seeing slightly later in this opening. Right there is Giorno Giovanna during his, I believe that is towards his fight, his fight with Chocolata in part 5. I could be wrong though. It's been a hot minute since I've seen all the Golden Wind fights. And there is Josuke Higashikata. Now, Jolene Cujo, Giorno Giovanna, and Josuke Higashikata make up the second trilogy of JoJo parts, which some people dubbed the Children arc, because Jolene, Giorno, and Josuke are all children of the first 3 JoJos. Who, if you're already on Stone Ocean, you know how this works already. If you don't, you're gonna have to wait till we get to those parts. And then there is Jotaro Kujo and his stand Star Platinum. I don't know why I decided to put on a stand, but not the stands of the other 3. Jotaro is the third and last JoJo in the original Stone Mash trilogy. So yeah. Oh, and right there, just as Joestar, the second JoJo in the Stone Mash trilogy. And Jonathan Joestar, who we've previously seen in all my past videos of Part 1 fight breakdowns, in which, he was the first JoJo of the original Stone Mash trilogy. And on top of that, dude's just a friggin' gentleman. Anyways, now I'm gonna go back so that we can hear that full beat play out, because it's a really good beat. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. Back in October when I first watched the series, I'm not usually a guy who hums music. This, I was humming for like a week after, because, god dang it, it's too good. This is really where people say that, because, I was thinking about wording it one way, but no, I don't want to word it that way. JoJo music has notoriously been really good, and this is just an example of the music being really good.
空
There we can see Jonathan Joestar sitting atop the mansion, generally showing his position in the beginning as sort of like this rich, spoiled brat-styled character. Although we've quickly learned that he's not that type of character. He's a bit different, but you get my point what I'm trying to get across. Then we can see Theo as he jumps out of the wagon in the first episode. So giving us the absolutely iconic moment where he lifts his hair up and they play a really strange sound effect because I guess it was cool. So there they are looking at each other. Not only this will set up their very long rivalry. I'll have to explain that by the time we get to Stardust Crusaders. But in addition to that, it just sort of sets up the dynamic that's going on here. Here with Jonathan being on a higher staircase, showing he's the more well off of the two characters, and Dio on the lower staircase, kind of showing off he's comes from a poorer background than Jonathan, I guess. It's just a really cool looking frame. So there is the Joestar statue. If you remember back to their fight in episode 3, this was the statue that Jonathan then put the recently vampire Dio on to try and kill him. So there is Dio's arm holding up the stone mask right before he rejects his humanity. If you know that entire scene, you know how it became a big meme. So yeah. This is, again, where the openings start spoiling a ton of stuff. So there is the tree. In episode 2, I believe, we are shown that Jonathan, who really loves a girl named Irina, carves this heart into a tree for them. And speaking of the lady, that's Irina. She really is more of a background character. She becomes way more important in part 2 and is mentioned in part 3, but she is long since passed away by the time Stardust Crusaders takes place. So there, that is the kiss also recreated from episode 1, in which this kiss right here, this whole moment, Dio basically forced himself upon Irina, and this is kind of what led Jonathan down his anger and why they fought back in episode 1. There's also the fact Dio burnt Jonathan's dog Danny, but I think a combination of the fact he no longer has a dog and this just sent Jonathan over the edge and led to the fight in episode 1. And there is Jonathan, ow, just hit my finger. There's Jonathan running up and punching Dio. And then there's the blood spraying on the mask, which, back in the first fight from, again, episode 1, Jonathan punches Dio so hard some of his blood sprays all over one of the walls, particularly the wall holding the stone mask. And that's when their spikes pop out, and both Jonathan and Dio partially do their own investigations on the stone mask. So there we get to see the spines of the stone mask. Basically, when the mask is put on and blood is wiped on it, about, I think, 6 or 7 spikes come out of it. 3 go on the left side, 3 hook into the left side of your face, 3 hook onto the right side, and one or 2 hooks onto the top side, to the top of your head, and turns you into a vampire. And then there are the 5 cops that back in episode 3, well, you're gonna see, shoots the now vampire Dio, which is how we learn that guns cannot affect vampires. And then there is the scene of Jonathan holding his father. In case you're wondering why this is happening, and for whatever reason you're still not caught, and for whatever reason you're not caught up with the series yet, Jonathan's father here was the blood sacrifice Dio used to become a vampire. So there is Jonathan's outfit from the last few episodes of Phantom Blood as he raises his finger to the sky, something that is not only brung up in the third opening, but also I believe the fifth opening and in the seventh opening, I believe. So yeah. And this is also kind of showing how he's pointing towards the heavens, which is showing his more good nature compared to Dio's, well, being evil. So, even though Dio has a shirt on, this is meant to recreate a scene in the very long episode 3 fight in which once the Joestar mansion starts going up in flames, Dio just straight up starts walking on the wall like a supermodel. So here, this is from episode 2, I believe, in which Dio takes the stone mask and tries it on a random street thug, and that's how he finds out it's actually something to turn into a vampire, not an execution mask like he originally thought. So here we just get some flash by manga panels. I'm not going to go too in depth, seeing as they're all kind of self-explanatory. So there is Arena turning around, like, Jonathan, because I don't know why she's turning around. This is something that never happens in part 1. I'm guessing it's because she's, kind of scared or something. I don't know why the scene's in here. So there we can see Jonathan in his now, I guess, iconic outfit that he wears in the final few fights of part 1, in which we get to see his big muscles and his gloves, along with his shoulder pads. And in case you're wondering where he got his shoulder pads from, seeing as this is something apparently some people are confused about, is that his shoulder pads came from his fight with Tarkus. After defeating and killing Tarkus, he presumably ripped off the collar portion of the shoulder pads and put them on. Because shoulder pads were sick in the 80s or whatever. I don't know why Jonathan has shoulder pads, but it kind of makes him look cool, so I can't complain. So there we can see Jonathan generating Hamon. And this is the point where I kind of want to somewhat explain a bit more about Hamon. So, the stuff has one of two ways of working, okay? Or has one of two ways of being summoned, basically. Either you immediately generate it and you use it, or when you generate it, you store it and use it later. This is something that will become partially important to a character in part 2, but also, think of it like a battery almost, okay? So, when a Hamon user is breathing, it's like they're plugging in their phone and it goes up to 100%. Then, as they use it throughout fight, it slowly drains, like a phone battery, and when it's around maybe 5-ish% left Hamon in their system, that's when they would usually generate it again. So, yeah. So, this scene, this is something that really is awesome to me as a person, because it's kinda cool. So, as you can see, Jonathan runs up the stairs with this anger, and actually, those flames in his eyes, those are real important. If you've read part 7, then there is this ability named the Dark Determination, which is basically characterized as when an intense feeling to protect or to kill a certain person takes over and rules every other part of a character's body. Nothing else is important. The only thing is important is whether or not this person is either protected or killed. Basically, all their needs, water, medical attention, all of it is thrown out the window for their lust to either kill or protect. Now, in this particular scene, Jonathan's dark determination is particularly activated when he wants to fight Dio, seeing as Dio at this point in the story has taken almost everything from Jonathan. So it makes sense that he has an intense hatred towards Dio and an intense want to, kill Dio. So his dark determination eventually takes over. And throughout the parts, this is actually a constant thing. In part 2, it happens after a certain character's death. In part 3, it happens after a legacy character dies, we'll put it like that. In part 4, it is in the final fight in which Josuke gets mad at his main villain. In part 5, it's Giorno's entire character. In part 6, we particularly see it a few times in a few fights. And we also start seeing some other characters, mainly Weather Report from part 6, use it. In part 7, it appears during the True Man's World arc, which, if you read Steel Ball Run, you know. And in part 8, that JoJo, who I will not name because I don't want to confuse people, he also uses Dark Determination a few times, along with some other cast members using the ability as well. And also, forgot to mention, in Steel Ball Run, Dark Determination takes the form of these flames in Johnny's eyes. So, basically, to explain, when Dark Determination takes over a person, it's usually symbolized by an intense fire in that character's eye. Now, granted, the only times we actually see this are in the opening of part 1. You see it in part 6 and I think an anime exclusive scene, and we heavily see it in part 7. Every other time I've seen it, to my knowledge, it's been a weaker version of it, so the fire in the eyes don't manifest. And there we can see Dio just sitting on his throne, all menacingly holding the stone mask. So there we just saw a few flash of manga panels from part 1. And there we can see Dio, about ready to lunge in for an attack. Jonathan, about ready to send his Sunlight's Yellow Overdrive directly into Dio's face. Now, I want to also bring this up, because this does relate to part 3. Now, this particular scene, this is taken from the final fight, which I just covered last week, in which Jonathan goes in for a Sunlight Yellow Overdrive punch, and Dio tries to freeze his hands. However, the way that they are framed here is very similar to the ending fight of part 3. To begin with, Dio obviously is there, and he's framed in this greenish fire energy kind of thing. And that relates to part 3, seeing as he stands from that part when a certain amount of the power level is being used. The user will then be surrounded by this yellow goldenish energy, and Dio in part 3, who has a stand and is still alive, we'll get to that when we cover part 3, he in that fight is framed in that golden fire because he's using a lot of his stand's power. Jonathan here is also framed in that fire. Now, this is the part where I kind of get into a little bit of a theory. So basically, some people, myself included, like to think that Jotato Kujo's stand, Star Platinum, is actually a reincarnation of Jonathan's soul, explaining why otherwise a character who would be very rude and brash like Jotaro is still very much a loving and caring person, because Jonathan's soul, which not only makes up his stand, is also a part of Jotaro's soul. So, in a sense, when Star Platinum is fighting Dio, it's like Jonathan fighting Dio. And in that particular fight, much like how Jonathan here is being being surrounded by being framed. That's what I was looking for. Being framed in the red fire of not only actual flames but also Hamon. It's very similar to how later in part 3, when in the final battle, when Jojo is using a lot of Star Platinum's power, he's also framed in the same golden yellowish energy that Dio is framed in. It's just like this really cool thing to me that that this particular scene is an unintentional reference to the future of the series. Alright, and that is the end of the opening, where we can see this spiral up shot of presumably the Joestar Mansion, even though by that point in the story had already been burnt down for like a year and a half or something like that. The timeline in JoJo is kinda weird. And the opening ends with the stone mask being so pivotal to the story being thrown in the water. A reference to what happens to Dio, where he finds himself in a coffin with Jonathan's dead body, should I phrase, with Dio's head still being alive. Anyways, so that brings us to the end of this opening, and it's definitely a good opening. It's not only is the music good, but a ton of the visuals just work. Because not only do they, foreshadow future events, they also foreshadow events further than people like to think. Because people like to joke that, yeah, they spoiled all the JoJo's in the first in that first 2 seconds of the opening, but then they also partially spoil not only the future Steel Ball Run and Stone Ocean, they also somewhat spoil the final fight of part 3, which I cannot wait to get to. It is a really cool fight in my opinion. But that being said, that brings us to that. If you made it this far, please, I beg of thee to like and subscribe, because it again just pushes the content further. And I will see all you people next week when we finally cover the second part of the series, Battle Tendency.